Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this edition of The Future Mind. Today, we have a very special guest and dear friend here at the Pari Center, Amy Lemon. She has been a professional actress for 40 years in New York and Los Angeles. Her pursuit of knowledge into the nature of being a conscious human has been a lifelong study. Her 45-year spiritual practices and personal phenomenal experience have all opened and awakened a curiosity that has helped to heal her early childhood experience of being sexually, emotionally, and physically abused by a family member. She spent years working on the board of directors of a not-for-profit, the Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse in upstate New York, where she raised her two now adult daughters. Amy will be in conversation today with Àlex Gómez-Marín, director of the Pari Center. He is a physicist turned neuroscientist. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics and a master's in biophysics from the University of Barcelona. Since 2016, he has been the head of the Behaviors of Organisms Laboratory in Alicante, where he is an associate professor of the Spanish Research Council. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Àlex. Welcome.
Thank you, Eleanor. All those titles will be useless today. Today it's a difficult session, a beautiful one, a really hard one to introduce. Let's see if I can set the tone right. So we tend to talk about the consciousness and the sacred and the arts and cool ideas and science and so on in an empirical and theoretical way. So kind of the light of consciousness. But of course, consciousness has also its deeper and deepest shadows. And because they're shadows, really, we don't talk about them, of course. And perhaps the darkest shadow, or one of the darkest shadows, and it's not about doing a ranking here, it's child abuse. Now, for the moment, I'll just share that there's been a recent personal experience in my own family of that we are still digesting. And when that happened, whatever that is and whatever that means, I realized how fucking pervasive this seems to be, how pernicious, of course, this is. And if that wasn't enough, how incredibly silenced that phenomenon is. And if that wasn't enough, I had the feeling, the thought, the sense that this is impossible, right? That these things are impossible. Like some things, general, large numbers, you say, of course, things happen in the world, but when you go from large numbers to small n, and this small n, as scientists say, is kind of in your own house, then at least my reaction was, this is impossible. And how ironic that I now been talking about a science of the impossible, all these anomalous. So here you go. This is pretty impossible. And not only impossible, it's rather unthinkable as well. All right. So this is going on. And then I hear Amy again speak about her own story and doing it so kind of publicly in the safe space, I believe, that the Pari Center is. And so because she talked about it, I could go and talk to her about it, which I hadn't done with anyone except from really close members of my family. And it felt like, what's said about NDEs and other experiences, other anomalous experiences, that people don't talk about them because they don't know what to do. So it's thanks to having Amy around that I've been able to start digesting what's going on. And so I felt that as part of this intimate healing process, that it would be beautiful and perhaps even compulsory to share a little bit of that, not the details, of course, but about that topic with her and through her experience and guidance. And well, as you know, Amy, you're such a brave and generous woman, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So yes. So I wanted to start, Amy, by thanking you, as I thank all my guests, but this is not a normal one, as it's already clear. And I wanted to start, there are many topics and subtopics and aspects. Let's begin with family secrets, right? Because we could talk about definition, types, prevalence, causes, and so on, and maybe we do. But there's this funny thing about all these secrets that are kept in families, dark secrets, right?
Mhm.
And also generational chains and how to break those chains. Thank you, Amy.
Wow. Well, thank you, Àlex, for bringing this out into the light, because as you said, shadows hang in the shadows. And when things are in the shadows of our consciousness or in our family dynamic, in our family secret, our family closet, they don't see the light of day. And we know from our consciousness studies that when we don't bring something into conscious awareness, it's not that it doesn't exist still, it still exists. It just, as you used a wonderful word, it becomes pernicious and insidious in when it hides in the shadow, even in our own psyche or in our family or in the world. And I think this topic, particularly because it's so hard to talk about and it's so hard to look at, that it wants so badly to stay in the shadows. And you ask about the family particularly. The family in our society, in most societies, is supposed to be the safe place. The family's where you're nurtured and where you're watered and fed and loved and can blossom into yourself. This is ideal. And we all want to put that face out into the world as a family. It's certainly true in my family dynamic, that we're so good, we're so wonderful. This is the perfect family that we present to the world. And aren't we all just lovely and fantastic? Which makes it, when that abuse is happening in the shadow, it makes it even harder for everyone in the family to say, hey, there's something really pernicious and awful going on here. And when it's even hinted at I'm going to speak specifically in my family, it is so shut down. And so you're so shamed for it. Like, that doesn't happen in our family. Our family's, wonderful, and everyone loves us, and we're successful and adapted and funny and etc. And so, and because it's in the family, there's a tough thing about child abuse. If someone walked up to a child on the street and the child was playing in the street randomly and slapped them and punched them and threw them down, the entire community would rush to the child's hope, we hope, and go, hey, what are you doing? We don't do that to kids. But since it's in the home and it's happening by someone who's supposed to love and protect you, it becomes a very different thing, especially for the victim. I call myself the victim. I was as a child. Now I'm not a victim of at all. I don't feel that way. But certainly as a child, children are victims of this heinous crime. And in the home, then the one who's been abused loves the abuser, right? And so the conflict interpsychically is so, as Àlex said it so well, it's impossible. It's impossible. This can't be happening to me. It's impossible. So, and if I tell it, then I'll lose the love of the loved one, because I know it's bad and it's icky. And so you just hold it in. And I could stop there for a moment and let you come in. or if you'd like, I can talk more about inner psychically what happens to a child when that's happening to them, which is interesting and informative. But if you want to stay within the family unit, that then, by the way, ripples out to the wider community. And I'll just speak for a moment about my experience with child abuse prevention. The people who want to raise money for the abuse of animals, which we all do, I give there too, raise 10 times the money we raise. We're trying to raise for children because people do not want to think this exists. They are either traumatized by it themselves and turn away. They are really, they just think it's impossible that it's happening in their neighborhood. And the law enforcement detectives I worked with for years, all they did was investigate child abuse. I would have them come and talk to my youth group I ran, and because I felt that the youth could be out in their community, and kids would disclose to them, which is what happened. They won't tell the teacher, but they'll tell their friend. So, but this detective said in Dutchess County, where I live in upstate New York, and there's all kinds of different socioeconomic, there's not a lot of racial diversity. There's a lot of, there is, concentrated in the city of Poughkeepsie and Newburgh. But he said, I've been in every single township, in every single town and city in this county for child abuse. And it's very hard to prosecute because it happens in a closed area. But these detectives are so well trained to really suss out what happens. And just for a little side note, the Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse and other centers like this, ours was one of the first, really focused on the child. So when the child came in to be interviewed, they were not re-traumatized, which happens a lot with trauma, just by being interviewed by a big scary policeman in a police station. So they come into our center where they're given a teddy bear in a nice little room and the camera's hidden, and it's really centered around the child. So they're not re-traumatized in that telling of it. So I'm going to stop there and see what you want to say about that.
Yes, I would like us to be a bit more specific because I approach this as entering into a fog, right? A mental fog, an emotional fog, spiritual fog, familiar fog. And it took, and it's taking kind of months to progressively see it dissipate. And one of the things I realized is that, sure, we've all heard of child abuse, but really, at least in my case, the only specific, not images, but kind of the stereotypes are 2 or 3 hyperbolic cases, which are truly evil, right? And that's what. But then I want to talk about red lines. But then there's a gradient, and part of this not seeing or not being able to see or not being willing to see also lays into never really talking about what this is, right? Like we say child abuse. Okay, what kinds of abuse? And if we speak about sexual abuse in particular, what is considered a red line? And despite seemingly all knowing very well what there is, I realized a priori I wasn't that sure. Like really, okay, this has happened. How bad is it really? And what are the consequences of that really? And what to do about that really? And I won't disclose details because it's not appropriate here, but I was very surprised also when sharing it with different members of my own family, how there were different mechanisms for doubting it, minimizing it, dissociating it. And then there's, there are all these mechanisms, but it's kind of this foggy shadow gradient where, yeah, child abuse, we know the most horrible cases, but okay, that thing, you see, maybe you see it once and you don't give it a lot of importance.
Mhm.
And that can be a huge mistake. So also because you have I don't have the first
Mhm.
hand experience of that, I may say, but you do. So help us be more specific about these red lines, and because otherwise it seems like we're talking about some abstract concept, and yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's really bad. No. What's 2 or 3 specific examples? It can be made up of what's really going on and why it is so bad.
Thank you. That's very, very important. And like, for instance, I wasn't in a horrific case. I wasn't locked in a cage and starved, and it was ongoing. It was subtle and sometimes not so subtle. And therefore, in my own mind, it was, is this really? No, this just is what happens. It wasn't so grievous in the telling of it, right? That it would be, oh my God, arrested. All right. Especially since it was a minor who was perpetrating me, okay, at the time. So that red line is what confuses the victim. It confuses the family. Because of course I told, this person's hurting me. This person's hurting me. It was witnessed they were hurting me. It was witnessed on a daily basis they were hurting me. And the sexual stuff was told by a caregiver. Hey, this shouldn't be happening. And it was, that doesn't happen here, or that's just normal, or that's just, don't do that. And so in my mind, it was normalized. It was minimalized. I was made to feel wrong about it. I incurred the absolute hatred of the perpetrator, whom I loved and adored because I was telling. And so I just pushed it underground and got out of the house as early as I could when I was 17 and moved far, far away to New York City. But and we could get to that, all that is carried with us. So the red line is, when I was working with children, child abuse prevention, we had puppets, age appropriate, right? So we go into the classrooms and we do the puppets and we teach good touch, bad touch. No one should ever tell a child to keep a secret. No one. And that's clear, okay? And the good touch, bad touch, wherever your swimsuit is, no one should touch you, or they should not touch you without your permission. And if they do, you need to tell. So we also gave them little wooden coins with our number on it. So if they needed to contact us, they could put it in their pocket, because if it was someone that's home doing that, they wouldn't. So that was a way to do it. So and you're talking, Àlex, about a fog. I have to say, all these years and the therapy I've done and the work I've done, I still go into a fog about it. And because it's a very foggy, unboundaried, unclear boundary until you decide, right? And the law decides this is child abuse, right? But within the family, well, all I did was, well, you misunderstood me. I didn't, that wasn't what I was doing. I can't believe. So there's all that goes on. And, specifically, if someone is touching your child sexually, that's harm in any way. If someone is verbally abusing your child, that's harm done to that child. Obviously, if someone's hitting your child, physically hurting them, that is also harm. And all those harms, if we can get into that at some point, maybe about what happens in the brain to the growing brain when it's harmed. Horrible things happen. But when it's arrested immediately, meaning the child tells, or the perpetrator's caught, and the child is immediately taken as soon as possible and told, you did nothing wrong. This other person did a very bad thing. And because of that very bad thing, we do not allow that person in our home anymore. We don't allow contact with that person. That's how bad what they did to you was. And then the child can then regain themselves, regain the power of their own personhood and their body, because that harm takes away their personhood. In those moments, they become an object, and they know it. And they know it intrinsically. And so when you give that child a voice, this happened to me, and here's the red line and the drawing of the picture. We don't cross this. And that person, even though they're beloved in our family, they are not allowed to come into our family, because that was, grievous. And then the child owns themselves. They also know they're protected. They've told and they're protected. I told many, many times over and over again, never protected. And, because it was the person lived in the home, it continued. I couldn't get away from it. Right. So the fog, Àlex, the fog is, you're so clear about that. And I still sometimes to this day have to readjust that and go, yeah, that really happened, because my body will tell me. I'll start talking about it and I'll start shaking, and I'll say, wow, okay, I can't talk my way around that, because I'd still like to, because I'm estranged from family members. Because I told, and when I finally grew up and could tell, that's not true.
Yeah, there's
Or
something that, sorry, I was going to say there's something funny about the word family and familiar, right? Because then that becomes familiar.
Yeah.
And so we've spoken in private a few times about what happens next. And it's also so interesting to realize that one of the things that happens is, well, we've caught this thing, and now we'll take some, let's say, physical measures, like this person is not going to, and then finito, it's like, all right, back to normal, right? as if kids were stupid, as if kids didn't have an inner sense of the constellation of the entire family, as if, well, now you're going to be seeing this person in the future, but it's just, well, we'll make sure that he or she is not alone with you, and pretend us as adults pretending that, well, that's already problem solved, we fixed it, right? And then we can continue our lives as normal. But it's like, no, something is profoundly broken, and this is kind of round two of sacrificing our children to this thing we call the family, right? And how, well, yeah, tell me again, and as all of us, why that isn't enough at all.
wow, well, that's it. Most children are abused by a family member. The overwhelming majority of child abuse happens in the family. So, and it has for however long. I was thinking this morning of Charles Dickens and all his writing about child abuse from his own experience. And it's age old. This country had child slaves basically, for a long time, not just slaves in chains and from Africa. There were child slaves, and right here in Brooklyn, where I am with my daughter, they were going to work 7 a.m. and work till 7 p.m. till they were exhausted and barely fed. And that was okay with our society. So we've moved a little bit forward, but it is because it's family. And I think we have this whole construct and this archetype around family that we have to crack open, Àlex, that we have to say, you know what? Because for me, I don't live in that world where family's everything. We protect the family. I don't live in that world, because that world was shattered for me. So, but I see it in people all the time. Well, you can make repair with with the perpetrator. Maybe when the child is an adult and decides they want to do that, when they have their own facility and faculty and their own, they own themselves finally, that the child could ask for that. I mean, the adult child. But no, in my experience myself, and with a lot of families, that just throws the child again. You weren't important enough. The other person's still more important than you because we're going to make sure they're included at Christmas. That's the second, to me, perpetration that you say,
Yes.
they come in again and even we won't let them hurt you, but they're allowed in the family. Ugh. Ugh.
Yes, and we tell jokes at Christmas as if nothing had happened, or as if we fixed it again. Now the bright side of this, because I think we're going to be talking about how this curse is also a blessing in a way. The bright side is that, and I can say this again from experience, which is very important in this conversation we're having, that the moment you, and I did that also kind of guided by you, the moment you make explicit with a reasonable amount of information and appropriate to the situation, you make it's like, let me put it this other way. It's like the magic power of words, in that saying, acknowledging aloud what has happened to the victim, telling her or him, this is wrong, really wrong. You have no blame in this at all. We are here to protect you. And a few other really basic things. It's like a magic spell. I mean, because otherwise, like, oh, victim, we screwed forever. But I've seen how just doing a little bit of that, it's like, I'm not a healer, but I've heard from healers that sometimes healing can happen like this, like ping. And so this second perpetration, it's a really good way of putting it, can also be turned into a counter spell immediately.
Yes. As you said, the child is not stupid and they know the family system. And you're saying, okay, we're privileging that person's, the perpetrator's presence in the family over your harm. And the fact that you put again and again in a situation where you're being harmed. Now, you said tell a joke at the dinner table. I'm going to say that for years, I sat around my dinner table with my family and heard over and over again a joke about my abuse. And it was put like this. Oh, when I brought you home from the hospital, and I'm going to out it, but I brought you home from the hospital. I heard you screaming in your crib. You were a day old, and your brother had a hat pin, and he was stabbing you with it. And that was funny. Wasn't that funny? And I was, what do you say? Sensitized to that because it was a joke. Or remember, and he tackled you and he knocked all your teeth out when you were, and that over and over again. And the aggression, till even at 40 years old, he punched me for no reason. And I'd have to go, you're going to fucking stop this now. But so over and over again, he was privileged and my experience was funny somehow. Like, wow, like, wow. And to this day, I'm the one who's out of the family. I'm the one who's ostracized because I told, and they minimized it. And they minimized it every day that I said, I'm getting honest to God hurt here. And it was physically brutalized, I was emotionally brutalized, I was psychologically brutalized every day. So nothing where I had to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Sometimes I should have, maybe blood, things like that, broken fingers. But it was, he was privileged as somehow that was okay. And now that I'm saying I'm not doing that anymore, I am literally on the app.
Can you share a bit about how much time? Because I know it took you a long time, because this is another misconception. Well, you were a little girl, sure, trauma, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, no, at the end of the day, no, like decades can go by and one is carrying that and perhaps yet not knowing that that's going on in your own psyche and your own body.
Wow, Àlex, that is a really beautiful thing that you brought out, because this is where, of course, the initial damage is done and I'm healed and I don't live with him anymore and I move, to New York. But the internal psychological and biological and your nervous system and your brain function and all of that is forever changed. Now, thank God for plasticity and healing, and you can heal in a moment. So how long did that take? A long, long time. In the meantime, people who suffer child abuse, in all those times, all those ways I said, if you're told by a family member you're a piece of shit and you're ugly and you'll never amount to anything, the damage of that is almost worse than getting punched once in a while, because it goes into your system and you start to believe it. So someone like me that had this repeated daily barrage of aggression and internalized all that. And I can talk specifically about what happens in the psyche that gets split and things like that, which might be interesting to the audience here. But someone who's experienced child abuse is much more likely to become victimized again. Now that happens because of what happens in the psyche. To become addicted to drugs. I was addicted to alcohol until I was 25. I started drinking when I was 11 years old because I was in so much pain and no one was helping me. So I found that alcohol took that pain away, and it was a miracle to me that I could take pain away. So I was addicted to alcohol.
Amy, this by no means I want to be what's the word in English? I'm not looking for details that are
Okay.
no, but when you say pain, what do you mean?
It's psychic and emotional pain that then of course manifests physically, because we have a soma psyche connection that's undeniable. And so I had chronic headaches, chronic stomach aches. I would get ill very easily, not a great immune system.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So the pain, but the psychic pain then becomes diffused in your psyche, because it's not that one thing. You've absorbed it, right? It's gone inside of you, and so you internalize it. And what's wrong with me that I'm the target of this aggression? He must be right. I must be ugly and stupid and an object and not worthy of loving treatment. In that internal environment, you make choices in your life that play that out again, and again. Now, addiction was one of them. I am, thank God, 38, 39 years sober. So that helped. Still couldn't come out and really talk about this until 3 years ago, and I'm 63 years old. And I found it is not unusual that women in their 60s and people in their 60s, men too, men are abused terribly too, that finally come out and say, this happened to me. Even if it was one incident in that person's life, they know that that had a really terrible, influence on them because it was never addressed. It was kept a secret. When it's brought out immediately and that person is given a voice, it's not, they were done, as you said, you go on and say that that perpetration is so heinous, it's not coming in. So, but I do want to say for a second, and this is specifically because I think it's a way for people to understand a whole lot of things that go on in our society that makes this quiet and unspeakable. Interpsychically, and you can talk about the neurology and the neuroscience of that, but interpsychically, when you're being harmed, and mine was a lot of pre-verbal harm, as I said, my first day home, I'm being stabbed by pins. So my nervous system doesn't know what's happening, is happening out of nowhere to me, right? But it's reacting. So the kid cannot, there's fight, flight, and fawn or freeze. So a child can do nothing but freeze. They can't run away, they can't fight back. So they freeze. And what that does in the psyche is you dissociate. So you dissociate, so you're not, it's a very protective, beautiful thing in the psyche that holds you separately from this. So in my case, that split, they call it in psychology, I went into these angelic realms and these beings of light who loved me and cared for me and told me I was beautiful and worthy. And, now I might cry, but that's where my psyche split off to, that I was loved. And I thank God for that, because there was this place I could go. And so I think when I stopped drinking, and I was always, in the spiritual realm because of these energies, let's call them, because I don't know what else to call them. You can call them angels or light beings, whatever. They were always there for me. And so I could go to them anytime and get this healing. But also what happens there, being split like that, also the aggression that comes in from the person goes into the psyche in a dark place, because that aggression has to go somewhere, right? So it goes in a dark place. And so therefore, in my case, and many, many cases, and that's sort of why addiction happens, you have this voice inside of you that tells you you're a piece of shit, you're not worthy, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthy, your worthiness is is only in how you're useful to me. So that ugly, scary thing lived in my psyche for a long time and appeared to me as demons, as horrible voices, telling me to kill myself, really awful things. I am not alone in this. This is what happens. So that split and the healing of that is bringing both of those together and saying, no, I am whole, and I'm not what happened to me and not what this person did to me. But to honest to God, Àlex, to take 60 till I'm 60 years old. And that was with a lot of therapy, a lot of spiritual healing, a lot of things, but because it's so taboo and it gets pushed so far in. Well, that was a long time ago, all the things you tell yourself. But there I was living it out on a daily basis, literally interpsychically with my own children, my own parenting. And I just want to say too that, people say, well, people who grow up abused are often become abusers. Sometimes they also become victimized again and again and again because of this freeze. So it happens to the person when they sense the spidey sense that danger's near, we freeze. So we don't really then see that this might be a dangerous person who's going to perpetrate on us. So they get in under the radar. There it is again. Rape. continual emotional abuse and neglect. Like that, this is the pattern of my life that I could finally heal when I unpacked all this. So not everyone who gets abused then becomes an abuser. They also become again and again a victim in interpersonal relationships, and it affects everyone around them. So we talk about, as you were saying in the beginning, Àlex, the light and bright and polka dots and rainbows and, the spiritual consciousness, and we ignore the shadow. We ignore it at our peril because it comes out and we project it out, or we project it in, and we have very bad outcomes, mental health, etc. And when we don't have a community that holds us and a family that holds us and says, no one should ever treat another human being like this, ever. Yeah.
Every time I speak, I feel like saying thank you, because these are kind of beautiful jewels you're putting here on a necklace one by one. I want to talk about the perpetrator too, and this strange constellation. I want to speak in particular about two forms of it. First, we'll go to this situation where, let's imagine, and we don't need a lot of imagination, by the way, but there is this uncle or even the father that's abusing, but then the mother doesn't do anything. All right. How on earth do we understand the instinct of mother instinct of protection? Where has this gone? What's the deal here? What's being traded off here in this particular case? And then we'll go obviously to how to make sense of the perpetrator in capital P, right? But first, like the accomplices, right? That's that word in English, the accomplices, like it's like, of course there can be one person that just goes and do it and it's very sneaky, but there's a constellation of kind of helpers, and the most unthinkable to me, and I've heard it because, like, look, like NDEs, it's not that I'm telling this on the radio, but I've spoken now first with you in Paris and then to a few friends, and guess what? They say, oh, look, this happened to me, to my wife, that happened to my wife. It's like you get it everywhere, and it's not uncommon to hear firsthand or secondhand that the mother was just looking the other way. How do you make sense of that?
First of all, I actually can't make sense of it. It's like it's like, because I'm a mother, because I'm a grandmother, because it doesn't make any sense to me, but I have in my own being. But I understand in a family system, and I started out by saying the family is incredibly concretized in the idea that we're the perfect family, right? In my case, this is not unusual, that we're wonderful, we're civilized, so really that is the sword everyone falls on. So if my mother could understand, and she and I have talked about it since, but if she could understand the depth of the harm that was coming to me, maybe she would have stopped. But if she would address that, it would shatter this family image. It would shatter the relationship, the special relationship she had with my brother. Things would be shattered. Okay. And then where would she be? I also believe, and in my heart of hearts, that my mother was also abused, because she has every trait. So when you see your child that coming up in there and you haven't processed it in yourself, it becomes absolutely terrifying. And you turn away from it and make it go away. That's not happening here. That's not like that. And so it was made by my mother, no big deal. I mean, siblings fight, that happens, that just happens, and that's no big deal. Now, don't do that. Stop doing that. but nothing was ever done. And especially the perpetrator would do it in private, and then when I would scream or cry, or he would turn it around. She made that up. I never did that. And then my mother would say, well, I don't know who to believe here. I just don't know who to believe. And then she would walk out of the room, and my brother would give me this sly little smile, like, I mean, like psyops, like psyops. So dark, so dark. So the mother also, to me, and I have very close personal relationships with people where the child, in this case, a little boy, was perpetrated on over and over again, sodomized over and over again since the day he was 2 years old. And the mother just looked away, looked away. The older son was being perpetrated. He tried to kill himself, hang himself when he was 14. That was never addressed because the same thing was happening to him. And then he perpetrated the little brother. And then when the little brother came out and said it happened, he went to therapy for a couple of sessions. And then, like you said, well, we solved that. And these things, I mean, the statistics, I think it's 1 in 5 women and 1 in 13 boys have suffered child abuse. Now, sexual harm, we could break that down too. I can get the statistics. But so this is not new. I know now in your audience, because of here we are, our audience at 56 participants, figure that 1 out of every 5 of those women have had something. Usually, women get sexually perpetrated, so do men. And often what was the most shocking to me through a friend of mine, it was her grandmother. Her grandmother. Now, I'm a grandmother. And that was just like really tough to hear, because I'm here, I'm babysitting my grandson in Brooklyn. He's 3 months old. It's like, how do you do that? I just don't even know how. And yet it happens. It happens over and over again. And it stays in the shadows. It stays in the family. It stays in the shadows.
Now,
And
when we use words to kind of shed light on these, they don't even make it for me anymore, because we could say this is evil, and I want to talk about evil a bit more towards the end. Or we typically say, oh, they're mentally ill, as if saying that somebody's ill means that that person is not really that person, as if somebody else is doing it. And maybe it's a mixture of everything. So it's like we have 2 or 3 or 4 options. Well, the first one is, as you were saying, I'm not very sure that's even happening. But then when we know it's happening, it's like, well, maybe she or he was a victim,
Yep.
himself or herself, or he or she is evil, or poor, he or she's ill. These look to me like models, like scaffolds, right? Don't make it, because I think the reality of this is deeper and more unfathomable than just saying ill. But what do you use as a conceptual frame to put, because it's like all of a sudden, let me put it this way, all of a sudden this family member, that's the image I have, just gets expelled from the flatland of the family pieces, and it's hanging there, and you don't know in what box to put the person anymore. What box, like in some of these Disney movie, right? Isn't there a Disney movie about this guy that lives inside the walls? I don't recall the name now, but and then they need to bring. Let me merge this kind of question with the second part, which is, in what box do we put it conceptually and emotionally, and then how do we, because I believe this has to be reintegrated. So the question goes together with restoration. I don't know if it's forgiveness, the whole process of return into the constellation, because I suspect if you expel the person physically and mentally and spiritually, and that's not good for the generations to come. So what do we do with the perpetrator?
well, that's such a good question. We don't have a box to put these things in, because as you see, especially as a family member. Like it's a stranger, that's a crime, you know, they get put away. But people who are, you know, especially pedophiles that are, you know, have access to children, they're very good at having access to children. They're teachers, they're scout leaders, they're, you know, they get put in jail and they get ostracized by the community when they get out, wherever they live. They have to always be a sexual predator. So, but within the family, you're right. If there is a willingness on the part of the perpetrator to come into a healing circle, we'll call it, and there's beautiful organizations that do this, and they particularly this child sexual abuse. Hidden Water is one of them that's here in this in the US, and they work in a particular way with the work of Parker Palmer. I don't know if you know who he is, but this beautiful circle, and try to integrate and try to have forgiveness and try to understand. And that would be beautiful. The thing is, the perpetrator has to be willing, let's say, to own what they've done and come into the circle to heal. And that is, we need more of these circles. What can I say? We need more of these places where that is appropriate, and where both parties and all parties who are in the family system would come into that environment and say, we want to heal this. So, I mean, I give to these organizations, I give financially, but they're powerful, but there has to be a willingness.
Yeah.
So
There's an element of freedom there
Mhm.
that's inscrutable. Do you think they know they're doing evil while they're doing it? And day is a big blanket day,
yeah.
right? But again, to have a sense of the psychology of what's going on, that's part of the unthinkable side of all of these. And we all make mistakes, right? So in a way, if we would just turn the red line into an orange line into a yellow line, we'd say, okay, Àlex, when you made this mistake, when you know, shouted to your girls because they weren't behaving, and then you feel guilty at night and so on. Well, were you aware? And well, yes and no. But I think this is kind of a difference in kind, not just in degree. So do they know? Do they know the harm, or at least that they're doing something really wrong? They know it, they don't care, they don't know, they're confused, they're dissociated, and then they come back and they don't talk to this other self. And
I mean, I would say
all of the above,
all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a one program there. But the thing that I understand is that person knows they're doing wrong. That's why it's in the shadow. That's why it stays in it, where it's away from. And so they have a knowledge that they're doing something wrong. And what, you know, I kind of would like to put in here broadly is that when me as a particular focused form of the mind at large, or God energy, or spark of life, as a precious thing. If I am, then therefore everyone is. And if we could come to that, you know, meta view of the preciousness of all of life, our, you know, our plant friends, our plant families, our two-leggeds, our four-leggeds, our slithery family, of we can bring into the family, take that little family and take it all the way out and say, we're going to be a loving family to all of our relations. It's a huge shift in consciousness, of course, that we're all talking about and doing what we can. But that, as soon as you see another human, another animal, a tree, a mountain, the earth as other, you can do all kinds of things to it, because it's other. And Carl Jung was very, that was sort of the essence of his psychology, was like, we're projecting out onto that person as other, what we don't want to hold ourselves. And, you know, that's his whole work, is is bringing together these light and dark and holding them, being able to hold the tension of the opposites and say, we can all hold this part and understand that in the human behavior that there's this, from the rainbow of colors into, terrible to all loving, evil and good, God and Satan. And I can only do my work on myself to own what, my own shadow and my own projections, and that makes a big difference according to the Buddha, according to Jesus, according to Yogananda and all the great spiritual teachers who say, you clean your own side of the street. That's from AA, by the way. Keep your own side of the street clean, and you're doing enormous good in the world. So like we always say, with the good we do, we drop the pebble in the water and it ripples out in all the good. It's also in the inverse. The evil you drop into the world rolls out again just as far. The perpetration. So this is hard stuff to talk about because there's not an easy answer for it. There's not an easy answer for it because we don't want to see ourselves as humans as being able to do these things.
Yeah.
The animals, people who beat animals, they're just the worst ever because we can hold that somehow. Or the heinous crimes of child abuse that are on the news.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
the
the othering sounds to me like a temporary dam we build, right? Just, but at some point it needs to be unmade. It looks to me, because, well, what do we do? There's clearly evil in the world, and so what does that tell us about being human, about our own humanity? And othering doesn't help. That's why I was so happy to hear again today, another time we've talked about that you don't rejoice in the victim position, because a victim is rightfully so, but I think there's another station in the way where one is working towards ceasing to be a victim because there's a victim, because there's a perpetrator, and so there's like a polarity there that ultimately craves for some higher resolution, right? And that's at an individual level, but at the level of a species, we are a weird species because we do amazing things, godlike things, but then we can be really evil at the same time.
Well, I mean, yeah, in that case, I would say we are failing miserably as a species, that we can do these incredible scientific, amazing achievements and feed billions of people all over the world and then when it comes to interrelating, we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do it. And that is where, to me, sort of ground zero. And it comes to seeing the world, you talk a lot about, and you interview a lot of scientists and materialists and scientisms. If we come to a wholeness in our perception and knowing of the world, that is really, we really are all connected and all one. Bernardo Castro calls it protrusion in the mind at large, in the mind of God, or we're separate little pieces of what is, at bottom and elemental in all of consciousness. And when we can really get that and go back behind ourselves and back behind everything that happened to us, and when I get back into my witness position and farther, and of course I have compassion and for all human beings, even the ones who are perpetrating, evil, because they just are ignorant of the fact that they're hurting themselves, that we're one. It's just, it's a not knowing. So the coming into that knowing of that we're all one, and whatever we perpetrate on our planet, we're hurting ourselves, and we're hurting everyone and all things. And that's a tall order. We've had great, as I said, spiritual teachers come throughout human history, and they're here now on the planet. And, It's a tall order because you have to break through a lot of illusion to get there.
Yeah.
If you listen, yeah, go ahead.
Now, incidentally and ironically, Jesus Christ said, "Let children come close to me," right? Which now I read in a different light, given what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
And also all these tales I tell my daughters at night, like Hansel and Gretel and all of that. I read them now in a completely different lens. Anyways, I would like to give space for people, but I have one last question, offering comment for you. You know, I'm trying to write a piece whose tentative title is something like "A Letter to Our Future Granddaughters."
Mm.
What would you tell them? Because maybe if civilization doesn't collapse and YouTube doesn't go bankrupt and deletes all the videos and so on, maybe they can watch this in 50 years, maybe in 100 years. What do we tell them?
I think the most important thing you ever tell any other human being, and certainly a child as you're rearing them, is that they are absolutely precious and adored and loved just because they exist, that they were created from a mysterious place, and that they are loved and perfect and exactly the way they are and who they are, and that they can hold themselves there, and that preciousness is to be protected in themselves and protected outside of themselves. And it's a great shield to me. Like if I had had that protection, that psychic shield, then whatever aggression was coming at me would be like, well, that's not true. I'm not ugly and stupid, and I'm not any of those things. And I did have that protection by these spiritual beings, but it's still, still got in there and, came out to harm me interpsychically, and then acting out on that, choosing the wrong partners, choosing the wrong, So I would say that, I always say this, and it's love is the answer. You got to love, 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 love with all your heart and all your mind and all that you have, each and every person, place, animal, or thing that you come across. If you actually, and we can do this, we intuitively know how to do this, open our heart and actually beam. We know how to do this. Beam the light of love onto everything you see. We all think if we everyone did that. What a vibration will change. But we can start with us, and as a practice and as a way of being in the world, and suffer the little children to come unto me. Yeah. Come into the wholeness of being, of life. Come into the kingdom of heaven within. Yeah.
And this is exactly what you did today.
Thank you, Àlex. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and for everyone who's here. Wow, you guys showed up, and I really, 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 really appreciate that. Really, thank you for that.
Thank you, Amy.
All you need is love. Exactly, Gary. Dun 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 dun. We can light now. Let's see what people have to say.
Yes. All right.
Thank you, Amy. If you would like to ask Amy a question or come in and share with us, you can use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen under reactions. Carmen, please come in and join us.
We cannot hear you yet. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry, can you hear
No.
me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your presence. And I want to particularly thank Amy for her immense courage and generosity and sharing this very powerful story that's actually quite prevalent, as she has said. And to Àlex for hosting this amazing forum and for sharing, Àlex, your experience related to this topic. I am very inspired by Amy's life and her story, and I'm a psychiatrist, so it's very important to know that when suffering happens to us, it's not a sentence, we're not damaged goods, etc. And just to say there's a mantra that says Om Mani Padme Hum, which means the jewel of consciousness is the heart lotus. And the other image is that the lotus is a flower, beautiful flower that comes from sewage, basically. So this idea that, sorry, my dog is participating here. This idea that we're a victim forever, it's not true. So Amy, I just want to congratulate you for taking action from all these emotions that come from this unspeakable, overwhelming pain that occurs when a child is abused this way. And your actions with the Child Abuse Prevention Center, etc. You're doing this today, etc. I was interested if you feel comfortable, if you could share with us practical tools from your spiritual practice that you have found helpful in transforming suffering into the beautiful lotus flower, and integrating what Àlex and you mentioned as well, all our polarities and our contradictions as human beings. And how is it possible that having experienced unspeakable, overwhelming suffering, we can come to a place where we can have compassion for ourselves and for others? And, I'm always kind of looking at practical, and what can people do to deal with these overwhelming, powerful emotions? What practical tools have you found helpful in your spiritual practice in transforming suffering?
Thank you, Carmen. It's beautiful to see you. Well, I do a meditation practice, and I have done since I got sober. I tried to meditate drunk. It didn't work so well. So darn. So that to come into the silence of yourself and to feel the presence of your own heart and your own indwelling God or light or whatever you want to call it, to come into that presence that we have inside of us all the time. The kingdom of heaven is within you, said the Nazarene, and many others. So when you cultivate that space inside, you also, those uglier voices that, just don't start to make any sense. You're like, who the fuck are you? Get out of my psyche. You don't belong here anymore. And then you start, for me, really, it's loving yourself is so profound, a healing practice, and we're not taught to do it, really. That you actually, if you take time to really go, when you hear those putting down voices that are just thoughts, and you actually drop into your heart chakra, your heart center, and you go, I'm gonna love myself right now. It's actually very simple. You don't have to sit zazen for 20 years or something. Like Àlex said, you change your mind, you change your life, and you change your way of being with yourself through, but to me, you have to get quiet and go in and quiet everything down. You go, oh, there you are. There you are, my real self, where I'm connected to everything. That's what I've learned, and I'm certainly not an expert on any of that, but it's worked for me. And there's all kinds of meditation practices. You can find one that works for you. And if you don't have that, drop into your heart and open it up. And if you can say, it's like open sesame. It's like a magic word. open my heart, and it will do it like a magic wand. It's incredible. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Carmen.
would add, look for an open ear and talk. This is exactly what I did with Amy, and it made a huge difference. So to the degree that that's possible, find a receptive ear and whisper your little story. And that's kind of the beginning of, letting it out and letting newer in. And it's incredible how this can catalyze things happening. Also, the second thing are synchronicities, because in this relatively brief journey of mine, there have been things that have happened which are very funny, like not funny at all, but you see it like weird, like getting somebody sharing some news from whatever, and then just sharing this with a family member who in turns replies in a way, and then, as it sometimes happens to me, and I suppose to all of you, you hear, so it's like not the listening ear outside, but you hear something kind of gong coming, and then I wrote that simple message to somebody, the WhatsApp message, that then triggered that person to just ask another person a question that then just kind of, it's like a magic lock, and then click, 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 and then the whole thing just, like the lotus maybe, started to unfold. It's like, wow, what was that, right? But it happens. It happens. I maybe I said it too abstractly, but if you get the point, listen
No.
and speak. Listen and speak.
And just, Carmen asked me about my spiritual practice, but I have a practice too of looking what's happening. If you see someone being harmed, well, that's none of my business. That's none of my, say something. Say something. Yeah, you're risking something to do that, certainly, but or say to the kid, you're beautiful and I love you. And you should be treated better than this. Maybe that'll enter that kid, Okay.
Thank you. Deborah, please join the conversation.
Okay. Hi, Amy. Thank you both so much for being here and having this hard conversation, courageous conversation. My heart is beating so fast, I feel like my chest is going to burst. I don't know why I'm nervous when you're the guest. But I think part of that reason, well, first let me say, Amy is a part of my inner circle. And she's new to my life, maybe like a couple of years, but I'm getting to know her more and more. And I experience her as pure love. And I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like we met via Zoom, but when I got to meet her in person, I was like, I have almost never experienced that much love coming out of one human being. And how you've managed to take something so difficult and become the loving person that you are is, I don't know, I guess it feels like it's magic in a way. And then Àlex, you and I do not know each other, but you've become like, I guess you're entering my circle in the sense that Amy sent me a video of yours not too long ago on extraocular vision. And I've been blown away, but I didn't meet you, but like I met your work. I was introduced to your work prior to that when you interviewed Ian McGilchrist. Right. And so anyway, I just want to say I'm so glad that you guys are becoming more and more part of my sphere. So that being said, I think the reason I feel so nervous is because your courageousness is opening up a part of me. And I'm like you, I don't want to start crying. I'm an emotional person. That's okay. But I feel like it's opening up a part of me that I'm almost not ready to look at yet. It's getting close. But As you were speaking, I thought about, I come from the field of education, and I was most recently an education administrator, school administrator. And often wonder why so many students came to me, because usually this would happen with like the counselors, but they came to me to talk about their abuse from mostly family members. And I wonder now if that's some unspoken connection that they felt with me. Um, anyway, so that came up for me. But I wanted to ask about misogyny. I wonder if the role of misogyny in our, especially in the United States, I can't speak to other countries, but I wonder if that has some impact on, and I know it's a little different with your brother because he was young, right? But um, the number of men that abuse women, like that 1-to-5 ratio you talked about. I wonder about that, and I don't know if you have any research on it. And then the other piece I want to leave with is addiction. I too am a 12 stepper, and I thought about, my term is critical complexity. We talked about the perpetrator and what might be going on for them, and do they have their own issues. So I guess what I want to ask is, the same way those of us in 12-step recovery have been driven by our addictions and often not being able to stop until we get into recovery, I wonder if something similar might be happening with people who are perpetrators. Like, do they have a difficult time resisting doing this thing until they themselves get into recovery? I know that's a lot, but you got this. Thank you.
Well, I can just yesterday in Scientific American, there's a really terrific article about how addiction and trauma intersect in the brain. And so that would be, I'd send that out to everybody if I could, but it came out yesterday. And the new therapies that they have addressing what you're just saying, Deborah. But yeah, misogyny, what did I see the other day? The leading cause of death for women, I think it's the third, is death by an intimate partner. So there's misogyny. And I feel like in my own case that my brother was privileged as a son. I'm the oldest son, and he was privileged, and that was it. I have 3 little sisters, and I ended up protecting them because I didn't want that to happen to them. So but yeah, I think that there's a whole heck of a lot of misogyny going on. And again, we bring out the other polarity of the divine feminine, and we can talk about Ian and the left and the right brain, and we bring these polarities together of the the hyper masculine. There's a divine masculine that's a beautiful thing, and that's also been lost for the men too, that their real divine masculinity has been subjugated by the patriarchy as much as anything. And they might hate themselves for that. Gary's nodding. I mean, it's just, it's internalized. So that's what I can say about this with 10 minutes to go. But I love you, Deborah. Thank you for coming. Speaking of a light of love, that person right there. 100%.
Todd.
Well, to you both, thank you for the audacity of the rawness of the subject, adding it to this forum. It's something, as you both have expressed, it's not part of most forums. As one that, first of all, appreciation to Amy for your vulnerability and bravery for adding this into this conversation, but a question to you. You have lived on both sides of the red line. And I'm wondering, because your activism in your later years with a different understanding of what it's like to be the victim, probably all of us here are wondering about the soul journey of the perpetrator, your older brother, and that maybe is a question that's not even answerable by yourself or anybody. But I'm wondering how you're seeing the red line, where it's at in this place called humanity, as one that ponders deeply and wonders endlessly about our evolution, it seems the red line is changing and moving. And from your perspective, having been on both sides of it, I'm wondering how you'd characterize that red line at this point.
Well, as I said, I think that the red line is harming, and we can look at that in all kinds of ways. And I don't mean in Alex's idea that we all harm each other in some way. We don't mean to. We're short. We say something we don't mean to say. We apologize, and but the idea of not harming anything or anyone in our realm of sphere of influence is a tall order. And I forgive, if that's a word that I could use. I mean, I've forgiven my brother, because I think what the hell was going on with him that he was so aggressive and aggressed upon? And that might be like Àlex is talking about, an epigenetic. You know, my father wasn't violent, but his father was a violent alcoholic. His father was a violent alcoholic. And maybe that's coming down, you know, energetically and epigenetically to my brother, where he acted out on it from a very, very young age. Or he was the king of the castle, and in comes little Amy, and God, you know, she's threatening my place in the family. Tried to annihilate me. So I understand it, and I don't know exactly what you're asking, but the line in our world is, I mean, we're still dropping bombs on children all over the world. You know what I mean? This is like, it's grievous. But I'm saying, if you can harm your own body and your own self by negatively talking to yourself, and then you can negatively talk to anyone else, or hurt or harm, or the environmental stuff, it's like,
Maybe more precisely, maybe the
Yeah.
question is, from you having the side of activism in your more mature understanding of where you've been, both on the hoarded side and also on the activist side, do you see a societal, the red line to me is getting closer because we're speaking about it much more. There used to be a red line, it was not even a gray line because it wasn't even acknowledged. But Me Too and everything else, the line seems to get much closer to where we are and where we can go. And so I'm not asking you to answer that question saying yes, but that's what I'm sort of taking from what you're saying by your activism and your commitment.
well, yeah, I mean, that's there too. And as a child, I would always stick up for the kids that were getting bullied. So that was in me too, just like, no, you're not gonna harm that other person. So yeah, I just didn't understand what you meant, line getting closer. Closer to our hearts, maybe. I'm just not sure how that didn't metaphorize in my mind very well. But yes, I understand what you're saying now. And yes, I think we are waking up, and we're talking about it, and we're doing things about it. We're saying we're mad as hell, and we're not gonna take it anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Todd. Good to see you.
It's lovely to see you and hear your voice.
Gary.
Amy, you're
Yeah.
amazing. You're amazing, Amy. I want to take this up to level of general principles, and where are we going with waking up? I mean, if I want to follow up on that, because we better wake up or we won't be around. I mean, the secular world is failing us. There is no morality as far as the secular world is concerned. And that's why things have gone so haywire. That's why we're blowing each other up and killing children and destroying our environment. And so I see three major principles that come out of this. One is the power of unconditional positive regard. I learned that from my late wife, who was a child psychologist and who was a child whisperer and who understood the power of unconditional positive regard. The second is the power of forgiveness, the capacity to forgive. You know, regardless of, and the possibility of the perpetrator repenting. because that's a dance, right, between the perpetrator and the victim about how they might be able to resolve the conflict between them, right? The perpetrator's guilt and the victim's sense of being harmed. The third is the necessity for personal work on shadow integration and avoiding the prepotent tendency to project the shadow out onto other people. We need to take responsibility for ourselves, right? I mean, and if we don't, you know, we're going to have like division everywhere. It's all going to be black and white, and things are going to come apart, and it's going to be Nazi Germany all over again. That's the nature of fascism. Is the idea that I'm not responsible, you're the problem. And so what bottom line, what do you think about the idea of a new postmodern approach, post-secular approach to what happens in the human heart, right? The dynamics of the human heart that might be viewed as a universal, deeply informed theology where we resuscitate the deity, where we bring God back into our lives and back to life.
Wow. Amen. Hallelujah. What can I say? I mean, this is, you know, who's doing great work in this.
We've been told how to do this, right?
Yeah.
At one point in human history, we were actually
we've been told
managing
over
to get
and
along
over
with each
again.
other.
We were told over and over again. I just think again, the Nazarene, take your splinter out of your own eye, you know, out of your neighbor's eye, take the plank out of your own eye before you, you know, take the splinter out of
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Hey,
Do not do to the other what you would not want them
Oy.
to do to you. I
Oy.
mean, that's Jesus' message, is the message of love,
Mhm.
that love is the solution.
Yeah,
And, you know, listen to George Harrison. I mean, George Harrison sings about it.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, my sweet Lord. I just was listening to that. So yeah,
yes.
but you know, Jesus was crucified by the Romans. So let's just, this is not an easy thing to get across. However, I love what you said. I love it. It's all good. It's all there. It's all real. And John Vervaeke is doing an amazing job.
Yes.
You know, John Vervaeke's talking about
Yes,
the
go.
meanings and trying to, he's not calling it a new religion, but to bring about a spirituality that we can all step into, even our secular friends.
Yeah.
And
it's a post-secular theodicy.
yeah,
It's the recognition that there will be evil. There will be bad things that happen to good people. And we have to work through that.
Yeah, maybe we can get John to Perry. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. He's amazing. I agree.
We're working on this.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Yeah. I agree, Gary. Yeah, there are many layers of isms, and when we thought we're done with materialism, the next level of the video game, I believe it's secularism and other isms we haven't fathomed yet. Yes, and it's weird because there seems to be a religious revival, and we're not used to it. We've been conditioned to, come on, mentioning Jesus 3 times already in an hour and a half. What is going on, people? But yeah, we've run the dry secular experiment, and in the 20th century, it doesn't seem like it's worked very well. Yeah. All right.
So we've gone past the half hour now. Shall I hand it back to the two of you? Do you have some closing remarks?
I just feel this, whatever this is, our meetings, our Zooms, our conversations, my life, your lives, that this is getting realer. It's getting more real. That would be my closing remark. And thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amy. Yeah.
It is getting realer. And Àlex, I'm only here because you asked me to be here. And our magical alchemy that day where we were able to reach out and from our hearts and offer healing to one another. And that is what it's about. It starts right here in your own little body. So thank you all for showing up and your beautiful comments. Glennie, Raymond, sorry we didn't get to talk to you.
One more thing, Amy,
Yes.
that comes to mind, and we spoke about it in person. I think a challenge we have, and we're practicing it right now, is to take this intimacy and this privacy and find a way to offer it in public without annihilating it or trivializing it. Yeah, if we can practice that and our 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people circles, if we can find a way to, this is like the coherence in quantum mechanics for the whole thing not to collapse. And if we can do that, yeah, maybe then there's hope, that it's very hard.
But you're doing it, Àlex. Perry's doing it. You know, you're all here. You're doing it. We're doing it. And like the ripple effect, let's keep it rippling. Let's keep it flowing out and out and out and out. Thank you all so much. Wow, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks,
Dear
Eleanor.
friend Amy, and
Thanks.
I look forward to giving you a big hug the next time you're in Pari. And thank you, Àlex, and thank you everyone for coming and joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you here again at the Pari Center. Bye-bye.
Thank you.